Well, good morning, and Keith Hayes. I think it's me. Let's see. Yes, it is. Good morning from Lewes in East Sussex Meridor Television, broadcasting as usual, break an egg, and this time from Lewes High Street, where we've actually taken cover because it started to rain and fairly heavily just for a moment or two. It's not going to be a very nice day. Not only that, but Britain is on alert for heavy storm warnings, so do be careful that you check the weather before you go out. Make sure you're appropriately dressed, and if you're driving, that you're aware of some of the hazards that bad weather brings. So we are now 24 hours after the main celebrations for D-Day, and I must say that if I've been critical of those people at the top, it would seem that our ability to put on a good show has not diminished. We certainly did the veterans proud. The media, mainstream media, covered them thoroughly, and all in all, I have to say that one couldn't complain about, if you want to call it a celebration. I don't think that we actually celebrate war as such. That's not what we're about. What we're celebrating is the fact that these people gave their lives. I say these people, I don't say that dismissively, because there were, a good many different countries, including Americans and Brits, Indians, Commonwealth countries, who actually served in the armed forces, in the Allies' forces, when we stormed the D-Day beaches on June the 6th, yesterday, in 1944. So it left me a little breathless and a little loath to take on the establishment this morning after they did put on a reasonably good show. And a reasonably good show, it was spectacular, and a good way of reminding us about democracy. Now, what I've done this morning is, because it's pretty chilly and it's pretty windy, and to be able to do something, is I've taken refuge in the doorway of a pub. Let me show you. It's let's see. There we go. The door of a pub. But this pub has got a very interesting name. It's called Harvey's Local Brewery. Of Man. So, that one larger piece. Right across the road there is the White Hart Hotel. Oh, I almost lost my hat now because the wind is really getting up. And those of you who follow me, you can see that where we've been looking at the sun rising over the downs, this morning it's pretty grey, pretty miserable looking, and once again it's starting to rain. So I'm tucking back in to the doorway of the Rights of Man. But the White Hart Hotel is where a gentleman called Tom Paine formulated many of his writings, one of which was called The Rights of Man. And Paine was disturbed at the way the establishment ran the country without giving access to the ordinary chap to have a say in how the country should be run. And famously, when he was in London visiting a friend of his, Benjamin Franklin, the famous American, same guy I think who talked about lightning coming down a lightning rod. clever blokes in the late 1700s, early 1800s, but he wrote and talked about the rights of man and waved his hand and said, over there, looking at the Palace of Westminster, there should be some place for the ordinary man to have a voice, and it should be called the House of Commons. He was some pup, Tom Paine. He had no formal education, but his writings were considered the greatest writings of their day, and in fact helped to foment and to kickstart the American War of Independence, or American Revolution, as we sometimes call it over here. So that's the Rights of Man Poe, smack bang in the middle of Lewes, across from the hotel where Paine wrote his treatises, but all adding to the voice of democracy. And that's been our theme the last few days and a couple of weeks, for that matter, since the elections, local elections on May the 2nd, is the question of democracy and how it's been mucked about. Now, I'm just an ordinary old journalist, but as such I get to talk to all sorts of people. And I was with the great and the good last night, men of no mean intellect, and we talked about what had happened in the House of Commons and how it could affect the English Constitution, which is unwritten. And they more or less agreed with me that it was very, very, well, shall we say, it is under threat because of all the nonsense that's been going on in the House, because the House is sovereign, and whatever it does formulates or contributes to our unwritten constitution. And of course there have been so many precedents and challenges and so on and so forth that it's rocky. So we have a rocky constitution at the moment, and the rights of man, our rights, are a bit under threat because of the nonsense that has been propagated in the House of Commons. I also spoke, I'm very fortunate in many ways, that a group of ex-ambassadors, UK ambassadors, who hold a lunch at the first Wednesday in every month, and I missed the last one, but I shall be going on July the 3rd or the 4th, I think it is, and enjoy their company, because I gather a lot of wisdom and a lot of knowledge from going to these sort of things. But I spoke to the organizer, and he was saying that the sort of problems that we've had at a national level are indeed reflected around the country at a local level. We discussed at length the cabinet system brought in by Tony Blair in 2000, and as he pointed out, it can now be revoked and go back to the committee system, and that is permissible after the Tory government changed the legislation to, they didn't change it back so you had to abandon the cabinet system, but they changed it so that you could opt out of the cabinet system if you wished. Well, we have the cabinet system in Lewes, which means, and all these things I got agreement from, as I say, the great and the good, people who really understand things much better than I do, but my assessment wasn't far off. But this really does deny democracy at a local level. That the cabinet system is not a good system. It gives power to a few people, it is open to abuse, and not only that, it's covert. The cabinet doesn't have to, and often doesn't, let us know what's going on. In fact, it doesn't even let its local councillors know. So every time that you may blame your local councillor for something that's gone wrong, something that's not being done, nowadays the popular referenda that take place over various issues it's not your local council in the main, it's the cabinet. And the cabinet does not have to tell anybody what it's up to, and that's cabinet is made up of the council leader, who in this year is a Tory, even though they are not the majority party. It's a Tory. with 4 Conservative nominees sitting on that council. So to all intents and purposes, we're being governed by the last lot who mucked it up over 4 years. And that's because of the system. We can abandon that system. They can do it tomorrow if they wanted. They don't want, do they? They've got power. And that's the sort of thing that is worrying, and which the average citizen probably doesn't realise that he's committed us to. The voter said quite clearly that these are the people we want in power. I didn't say it clearly because we got a minority opposition. Well, we got a minority government, really. I mean, there's 19 Conservatives and 22 or 23 opposition councillors. And that actually gave rise to the Tories being very slippery, and the Greens and the Liberal Democrats being very naive and giving the leadership, after they managed to get the council chairman, giving the leadership to the Conservatives. And what that was all about, heaven only knows. But perhaps that is something you can ask a local councillor about. But how silly. Nonetheless, those are the people that are leading us, and those are the people that we have to be very, we have to keep an eye on, because along with the executive, who are hardly covering themselves with glory at the moment, that group, the cabinet, are virtually all powerful. And once again, I chatted this through too with my colleagues that I was meeting last night, and they also broadly agreed that change needs to be undertaken. Will we do it in Lewis? Well, I doubt with this lot. I mean, when you're a minority party and you've got the zip, you're hardly likely to hand over the carry-all, are you? So I think that the rights of man are going to be subliminal again, until perhaps what we do is we get some sort of democracy back in Westminster, and then there can be a model for the rest of the country, because this last Parliament has hardly been a model for anybody on anything. Well, there we are. That's Friday morning. Feisty Friday. He's a millennial, told his parents that they weren't to use the word feisty because it actually was feminist. It's just the way that some people actually twist the English language to suit their own political beliefs is just beyond belief itself. It's Feisty Friday, but let's use feisty in the word that the meaning that I believe it has, and that is spirited and full of verve and vim and so on. So let Friday be like that. Let's see if we can resolve a few things today, and before we come back on Monday to take on another week. It's been an exciting week in many ways. A lot has happened, and not least of which is we remembered that our young men and our young women yesterday, 75 years ago, crossed the Channel on a very, very nasty day and faced this at the other end. They did it to fight for freedom, a freedom which I and many others believe is being a bit abused at the moment. A little bit abused. Let's see if we can do something about writing that. So it's Keith Hayes from The Rights of Man in Lewes, East Sussex, saying, have a good weekend and toodle pip. Till then.